Welcome to episode 14 of In the Abstract, the Lakeland Title podcast. I'm your host, Brian Johnson, the founder and owner of Lakeland Title. And for this episode, we brought on a very special guest to discuss some of the bills that have been filed in the Louisiana legislature for this session, particularly one that could possibly impact the blockchain businesses and cryptocurrency businesses like Bitcoin in Louisiana. So we have Louisiana State Representative Mark Wright, who represents District 77, which is kind of the Covington area. So thanks for being here, Mark.
Hey, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so I saw this bill that you had authored to create a regulatory sandbox in Louisiana, and I found the bill very interesting, and it was actually the first time I'd ever heard that term. So if you could kind of discuss what the bill does, and also kind of how you came up with the idea to file a bill like this.
Yeah, sure. So regulatory sandboxes are something that are relatively new to the United States, definitely to Louisiana, but they're not so new to the globe, quite frankly. We found out, and I should point out, Pelican Institute was the one that brought me the idea of carrying the bill, because I had done something with cryptocurrencies last session. Essentially, the state of Utah, for example, has created 3 sandboxes related to certain industries. So one of them was insurance, and one of them was fintech, and they've now officially created a general sandbox that allows any type of industry to come into the sandbox. And I mean, obviously, the term sounds a little juvenile, but it's actually perfectly fits. It's the idea that some kind of new disruptive industry, clearly cryptocurrency and blockchain fit this, that we don't have standard rules or regulations about them. We're just not sure how to put rails on them if we choose to. It allows them to come in. There's some due diligence, some paperwork, some investigation by the appropriate agency to make sure they're a legitimate going concern. We know what they want to try to do. The bill that we have gives about 2 years essentially for them to operate. If you exit the program, you have to give a 30-day notice. And it gives us as a state an opportunity to welcome new and disruptive industries without committing yet to regulations that we're just kind of unsure about them. They shouldn't necessarily fit right into banking. It's a different type of business and industry concept, for that matter. At the same time, we want to welcome. We don't want to say, hey, we have nothing for you. There's no place for you here in Louisiana. I had a very interesting experience over this. So 2 years ago, when I was first elected in a special election, I had a lobbyist from around here approach me. Had a client called Pelicoin, and they have cryptocurrency kiosks around the state, and their fear was that they're investing a good bit of money in these machines and the concept, and they didn't want to see some bad actors come in and kind of ruin it for them, for that matter. And so they asked for some sort of regulatory clarity. We started working with OFI to kind of create something that fits them, and we passed it last year. And before I brought the bill to committee, I said, I have to know more about cryptocurrency to do this. So I opened up an account with Coinbase. And,
very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
I use them too. They're great.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Bought some. I should have bought Bitcoin at the time, because who knew what was coming. But
Okay.
I bought XRP, and
I have some of that too. Yeah.
You got some. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Some Litecoin, and I just wanted to show I knew a little bit about it, and be able to talk to it. Of course, my XRP has shot up pretty significantly lately, which is nice.
Yeah, this week it went a little crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting part was somebody, I guess somewhere along the line, the last month or so since I filed this new bill, word got out to some people in Louisiana who are in the space, and they said, "Oh, look, I can't open up a Binance account." And I said, I don't know enough about Binance to say why they wouldn't. Um, I told them I'll open up something with Coinbase, and I got whitelisted for INX, the one that's I bought a little bit of that. So I said clearly those businesses didn't have a problem with Louisiana residents, but my understanding with Binance is just they haven't opened it up to Louisiana residents because there is nothing in law or there's no clarity for them. So I think it speaks to the idea that these businesses are making their own choices about how to sell their product, how to engage residents in certain states. And if there's nothing there, there's a little bit of, we don't want to worry about the business because we don't know where it's going to go. So that's what the Sandbox is trying to do. There's a few other states who have done it, as I mentioned, Utah, and then I think Florida, Arizona. I read some about Hawaii. And then I came across an article that struck me as what we really are doing. It's a Forbes article, and it talked about what Utah did. And it mentioned that, this really is the model for states and regulations. Because I mean, what's the old typical story? You got a state, they heavily regulate something, they try to apply rules for one industry to another, and it causes issues. This is a big step for us in Louisiana because I think we're going to see a way forward in the future about dealing with regulations. Let's learn about the business. Let's open it up to our residents and see where it goes.
Yeah, and just kind of see what the consequences are and what kind of issues they run into. But this bill only applies to blockchain related businesses. Is that correct? Or
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's all that's specified in there. So that's what we're focusing on now. And who knows down the road. I think there's actually another bill. Senator Mills, I think, did a sandbox related to insurance. So
okay.
but that's through Department of Insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that as the potential if it works out for the blockchain companies and it works out well, we could open it up to other industries and just kind of let people come in for a couple of years and these new technologies and new kind of businesses and just kind of see where it takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what we're seeing with blockchain and cryptocurrency is very much like we saw with the internet-based companies, back in the 90s. There's going to be a lot of new things that people will shoo and say, oh, that's not going to be a real business. And then, you see this, the latecomers come in, they improve the model, and you got Amazon, I mean, so we're kind of at the beginning of it. I can respect the argument of some people that think, oh, it's a bubble and it's going to go away. I don't believe that, but I could see why some people would sit back and go, what's this about? But let's not shut the door on that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's been going on for over a decade now. So if it's a bubble, it's a pretty long lasting one. So,
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So did you know anything about cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin or anything like that before you got in the legislature?
Not until they asked me to do that bill a couple of years ago, because we passed the bill last year, but actually we started it 2 years before that. And we did a study with OFI, and then we passed it the second year. Only thing I knew about blockchain was I work in the towboat and barge industry, the maritime industry. And so I tend to read different things related to ports and maritime logistics. And I read that Maersk, the shipping company out of Denmark, was working with IBM to create some sort of model with blockchain, because apparently blockchain is a perfect vehicle for logistical record keeping. Well, at least some people think so, right?
Yeah.
So, and it makes sense. And so I was trying to get my mind around that concept of an open ledger and what that does and that type of thing. And, I can't speak to that right now, but it does strike me that we're in the middle of a revolution here with this type of stuff that, 10, 20 years from now, we might look back on this like we do the internet.
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see where it all goes, because it is. I mean, it's still very early. We're in the very early stages. Most people don't even know anything about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we did the committee hearing this week. It was funny talking to some of the reps after. I mean, there's a lot of people who just sit back and listen and they trust the author. They'll ask questions, but they, kind of feel like, okay. But talking to some reps after, they were on the committee, they said, I wouldn't know how to even begin to understand it. And so I think that's true. I don't know how you are, Brian. I mean, I'm just always an intellectually curious guy. And so I'll kind of go down the rabbit hole with certain concepts to try to understand them. And you forget most people don't do that,
Oh, yeah.
unless they're forced to deal with it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I got into Bitcoin. My brother had introduced me to it, and I just thought it was a very interesting concept. So it just kind of, like you kind of said, like a rabbit hole. You just keep learning more and more about it, and then you put yourself in the Twitter and YouTube and social media Bitcoin communities and cryptocurrency communities, and you start learning more stuff, and it just kind of all snowballs.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, I hear you. And Twitter is the perfect place to pick up a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of garbage on Twitter,
Oh, yeah.
but you can get a lot of good info about crypto on Twitter. I mean, that's actually my main source. I mean, there's a lot of articles shared and, real high level movers and shakers, communicate that way. So,
Yeah. I like to kind of think of Twitter as kind of like a barroom conversation. Like sometimes it'll be something really good and interesting, and but sometimes it'll just be nonsense that you don't even need to worry about.
yeah, agreed.
But yeah, so was there a lot of pushback because I know this bill is going to the floor Monday, right?
It's going to the floor Monday. It actually surprisingly was on the agenda yesterday. We are moving very quickly on some bills, and I wasn't prepared. I could have done it if I wanted to, but we wanted to prep and let Pelican talk to reps and kind of be prepared with our talking points for Monday. So we're going to do that. Later in the week on the 21st, we're going to offer two House resolutions related to one, the Bitcoin, and one to a Louisiana business model. I'm sure you've heard of Moxie.
Oh, yeah.
With Charlie Dave. Yeah, he's bringing people in that network over. So we're trying to slowly introduce it to everybody, and we're going to take people with us whether they like it or not, I guess.
Yeah. So I could just kind of imagine, because I mean the legislature. I could imagine trying to explain blockchain and cryptocurrency to that group. It probably was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It was good.
Yeah, and then I saw some of the other bills that you had introduced relating to the income tax in Louisiana. So if you kind of talk about what those bills are about.
Yeah. Well, 605 is probably the premier bill, but it's tied to two other bills and two related amendments, because some of our bills you got to do an amendment separately. They are not meant to be serious attempts to pass legislation this year. What I did was I took this study that the Tax Foundation had done in 2015 about Louisiana specifically. They did it with a committee of 100. And they looked at every single source of revenue. And they, of course, they are considered probably the premier source for ranking tax, systems, however you want to put it. And so they went through everything: sales, personal, corporate, franchise, severance, all that good stuff. And they gave three options to reform it. And the sales tax, they basically said, look, if you wipe away all these exemptions and exclusions, if you tax services with a sales tax, you can lower it dramatically, from 4.5 to like 3 or 2%. And you would bring in so much revenue that you could actually significantly reduce or even eliminate, depending on how you did it, income or personal or corporate income. So I wanted to investigate that. And some of these tax reform efforts take a long time in Louisiana. I mean, centralized, we've been just 5 years, 6 years going on. So what I thought I'd do is I wanted to introduce them, get a fiscal note. And I mean, I'm sure fiscal notes are everything in the legislature, because you got to balance the budget. So it's going to tell you what the hit's going to be and whether or not you can do it. and it just took a long time to get the legislation. So we filed it. I'm waiting to get a fiscal note to get a sense of it. I'll probably amend it to look a little more like what I want it to look like. And then I got to, I've talked to the chairman of Ways and Means at the end of the session when we have one of our last committee meetings. I want to kind of sit down and lay out the vision about, what's the art of the possible with this. What I'm hoping to do is just kind of spark some thought in people's minds about where we could go. And, next 2 years, talk about it some more, maybe bring it to the next session. But in reality, these kind of things, I mean, this, you get in Louisiana, you kind of have you got to have a governor kind of embrace something and kind of carry it. So my hope is, when we get into this next governor's race, somebody might look at that package and say, that's where I want to go. And so maybe in the next term, we can seriously consider it. But I know it's made given a few professionals heartburn. I know some farmers were upset, and I've told them, don't worry about it. I'm not coming after you. I'm investigating it's a work in progress. So
yeah, and I guess kind of just plant those seeds and kind of see what happens and kind of vet out the ideas over time. So.
Yeah, amen. I mean, you saw Mississippi; they tried to eliminate their income. They're having to do some serious fiscal contortions with other taxes. I thought somebody told me, I don't know this for sure, but I thought to get rid of their income, they were going to have to go to like a 6.5% sales. I mean, one of the things that always scares people about Louisiana is our combined sales between local and state. I think we ought to look at that. I mean, but that seems to be the model that's successful. I think there's about 10 states right now, all of them pretty flourishing financially. Your Texas, your Tennessee, your Florida, even Washington State, they don't have an income tax. And as I understand it, the way the tax foundation explains it and other, I think even like a Milton Friedman, we'll talk about this. You don't want to penalize increase in income. You want to tax things that everybody wants and is going to buy all the time. Whether that's sales or property, that's your optimal taxation sources. So that's what we want to look at in my mind, but it's so difficult to pass that in Louisiana. But I think you see in the legislature now, and probably it'll increase as we move on, a real desire to say, look, is this working for us? I'm not a fan of what we did under Vic Stelly, almost 20 years ago, right? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, It just hasn't worked in my mind. And I think there's better ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Monday, do you think the Sandbox Bill is going to get passed? You think it's got a good chance?
Yeah, I think so. As far as I'm concerned, most people are kind of open to it. The concept itself is relatively benign. I mean, we're not taking huge amounts of money and putting it into something. I don't want to say it's completely, it's relatively harmless. Like there's not a lot of risk in this step. Usually under these circumstances, you kind of worry about what the executive branch might think of something and whether they'll support it. In this case, OFI is technically an independent institution. The commissioner is appointed by the governor, but it's not like a secretary. They're independent. So far the feedback's been pretty. They can't come out and support something like this because you're not allowed to. But I think they're open to the idea, and I think the fact that we did this cryptocurrency kiosk bill a couple of years ago is already kind of primed the pump to get something like this done. So I feel positive, but you never know until you get to the Senate.
Yeah. They can always do some interesting things.
Well, yeah, and look, God bless them, but go present a bill about this before a Senate committee, and you get all kinds of interesting comments and thoughts and stuff. So tune in for that. That'll be fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And tell us kind of some stuff about yourself personally. How did you decide to run for the legislature?
Well, long time ago when I was in high school, I wanted to leave my high school, Archbishop Rummel. I just wasn't making friends. I didn't feel comfortable there. I wanted to go to Jesuit, and I told my parents that my sophomore year. And my mom said, "Look, go see the chaplain." So I did, and he said, "There's a student council election in 2 months for your class student council. You ought to run." So I did what he asked me to do, and I won. And I was as surprised as anybody, because I wasn't one of the cool kids, and I still don't know that to this day why that was, but it kind of got me involved in student council stuff, and I went to Boys State, and just always I'm kind of a policy nerd, and just kind of gravitated to it. Got involved in some campaigns in college and out of college, and then the bottom line is my wife and I moved out of state for about 7 years with a job I had. I went to graduate school in Dallas, and I took a job there, moved around. When I came back, moved to Covington, and things just kind of fell into place. So I guess you'd say, to a certain extent, it's always been a goal to be in the legislature. I don't know that there'll be much after this, but I really enjoy it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Despite the reputation of the legislature, a lot of good people there just trying to do the right thing. And it's just a heck of a lot of fun for me intellectually to kind of take these ideas we're talking about and put them on the table and see if we can get some things done, because at the end of the day, it's all about, in my mind, it's like, what can we do better here? And I think there's a lot we can do better here, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
I know, I'm sure you think the same thing. I mean, so that's kind of how that went. I'm married. We have 5 children here in Covington. And so family's a big thing for me. I like sports. I like reading, so that's kind of my roundabout.
Okay. Well, the crypto community and the Bitcoin community, we're glad we have, such a good advocate in you over at the legislature, and some of those income tax bills. I mean, I really like the ideas you're proposing with those. And so I think you're doing, important stuff, and I think you're doing good work.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate the PR here and the help. Always, call me if I can help with anything, because, I don't in any way pretend I'm an expert on this. I need feedback from people who are in it. So don't hesitate, you or anybody watching.
Oh yeah. Well, I've got your cell phone number now, so I'll be hitting you up if there's any bills that we need some input on.
Sounds good.
And so how can people get in touch with you? Any of the listeners that want to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
Yeah, sure. My legislative email is probably the best one. It's just mwright, MWRIGHT @legis.la.gov. And I have a cell phone as well, 985-590-1204. Call me, text me, email me, and I'm happy to talk and, try to solve problems.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, and it was a great discussion, and I'll be interested to see what happens on Monday.
All right, you got it. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting discussion with Representative Wright. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that bill, and maybe Louisiana will become the next cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and blockchain hub. We'll just have to see how that works out. But very interesting idea. So if you're out there and you're considering starting some sort of Bitcoin or blockchain or crypto related business, if this bill passes, you'll have 2 years where you can kind of just experiment with the idea, and you won't have to worry about any sort of regulatory hurdles. So hopefully that can happen for y'all. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at @bjohnson and on Instagram at @bgjohnson, or my company is also on Twitter at Lakeland Title BR. Same thing on Instagram, Lakeland Title BR, or on Facebook at BR Closing. If you need to get in touch with the show, you can email the show at podcast@brclosing.com, or you can email me, Brian, BRYAN, at brclosing.com, or just give us a call the old fashioned way, 225-387-5005. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please give us a good rating. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We're trying to get those subscriber numbers up, so you can help us out there. And so thanks for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.